For those of you who may not know me yet, my name is Rabbi Elana Ackerman Hirsch. I'm honored to be the newest rabbi at Congregation Beth Israel. And in the few short months since I began working as your assistant rabbi, I've been fortunate to meet so many of the kind, welcoming, and thoughtful people in this community. It's exciting to be sharing my first High Holy Days with you. As you just heard from Rabbi Navarez, our theme this year for these High Holy Days is Out of the Depths, Finding Hope. Since the last Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, it has been easy to feel overwhelmed by a sense of darkness and feel stuck in the depths. The world feels chaotic and at times out of control. We've experienced tremendous loss as a Jewish people, and for many of us in our personal lives as well. And yet, our tradition wisely demands that during each High Holy Day season, we face the events of the past year, take stock of our lives, no matter what has happened. Through the cycle of the Jewish calendar, from Tisha B'Av through Ne'ilah at the end of Yom Kippur, our tradition asks us to go from the depths of pain and loss through the process of renewal of the world and of ourselves. We reflect upon and identify what we need to do teshuvah for, holding on to the hope that we will be inscribed in the book of life for a good year. Each year, we practice renewal and new beginnings, and we practice finding hope, even in dark times. Some years, like this year, that task might feel more difficult, and yet we are still called to practice finding hope. According to a Hasidic tale, our job in the world is to be a lamplighter, somebody who looks for the good and the light within ourselves and others. In this story, the lamplighter looks for light in the bleak desert and at the bottom of the ocean, places where it might not feel so obvious that there's light to be found. And yet, our tradition compels us to look for light in the world, even when it feels hopeless. Tonight, as we enter Rosh Hashanah, the day the world was created, we have the opportunity to shift ourselves from whatever grief or sadness we felt this past year into a new year and a moment where we can both acknowledge our pain and also look for the light in that painful darkness. We are entering a period of creation and creativity, a time of possibility and of making room to change and grow. During these next 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we can imagine the possibilities and imagine the kind of life that we want to live in the coming year. As we will read on Friday morning in Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 and 2, God's first act of creation was to create light. Light exists alongside darkness, and we have to choose to look for it. Just as the sun continues to shine, even though we see darkness at night, and just as the light of the eternal light of the Ner Tamid reminds us that God's light is always with us, we can also start to look for light in our personal moments of darkness. We can be lamplighters looking for light in unlikely places. As we've approached these High Holy Days, I've been thinking about a time of personal loss and grief when I was able to see light amidst darkness following the sudden death of my father in 2017. I affectionately call this time right after his death the couch days. For months after my dad died, my family would sit on the couch together and watch TV for hours, sometimes until well after midnight. We sat because we couldn't bear to get up off of the couch. But despite that pain, there are some moments during the couch days that I remember fondly. There weren't many moments of light during those first few months following my dad's death, but slowly over time, light began to get through the darkness a little bit more each day. And to paraphrase Leonard Cohen, it became easier to see the cracks where light could get in. My family started to laugh again, remembering the time that my dad was eating an apple. He said, "I'm done. I'll let the dog have a bite of the apple," our golden retriever. And then he forgot that the dog had taken a bite of the apple, and he took another bite of the apple with dog slobber. We also we laughed at the terrible memories of school lunches that he packed for us, not his forte. They were jelly dripping out of folded pieces of bread, not cut, but just folded. And mushy fruit in wax paper bags. Terrible. Despite the pain of his death, the laughter and memories I shared with my siblings and mom allowed me to consider the possibility that life might not always be so dark. I began to appreciate moments of joy and could begin to imagine a time of hopefulness. At first, I felt guilty for laughing or having fun. If you've ever been in a place of deep grief before, you might recognize this feeling. You'll suddenly laugh or make a joke or realize that you're enjoying the meal that you're having at your loved one's favorite restaurant. You'll see a spark of light, and then all of that lightness and joy that you felt in that moment of laughter or memory will disappear. Feelings of guilt, shame, or sadness might come up when we start to enjoy something, when we are in the depths. It might feel like we shouldn't find light or look for moments of hope. It might feel like we ought to sit with our grief and stay in the depths longer to give our pain the recognition we feel it deserves. And we must acknowledge and face the reality of our situation, no matter how painful. We must accept the world as it is so that we can know how to respond wisely and move forward. In many forms of therapy, the first step to processing and moving through difficult emotions is to name them. You literally say out loud, "I'm sad. I'm feeling pain. I'm angry." Research shows us that it is powerful to embrace our emotions and to name them. It is important that we do not ignore our feelings or rush to move past emotions without fully understanding them. But it is equally important to not let ourselves get stuck in those emotional depths. We have to find the balance and be comfortable holding two different truths at once, at the same time even. Like the truth that the sun continues to shine even when we cannot see its light, and the truth that we must continue to seek hope even in difficult moments. Another one of my favorite Hasidic stories illustrates the very Jewish wisdom of being able to hold two different truths at the same time. It is said of Reb Simcha Bunim, a Hasidic leader from 18th century Poland, that he carried two slips of paper, one in each pocket. On one, he wrote, "Bishvili nivra ha'olam." For my sake, the world was created. And on the other, he wrote, "Va'anochi afar ve'efer." I am but dust and ashes. He would take out each slip of paper as necessary, as a reminder to himself that we are both created in the image of God and that we are only human. On this Erev Rosh Hashanah, as we think about the ways in which we've missed the mark, we also have to keep those two truths in mind. On the one hand, we might think of something terrible we've done that makes us feel like we are mired in darkness. So we feel like dust and ashes. And on the other hand, the world was made for each of us. We have this capacity to grow and to change. We have the capacity to see light in ourselves and in other people. This story reminds us that we are capable of holding on to both the acceptance of reality, no matter how dark it may seem, and the possibility of finding joy. Recently, I taught a series of classes about Elul, the month right before the High Holy Days that we just ended. And in one of these sessions, a congregant shared that in the past, when something bad had happened to her, it was really hard for her to get out of the depths. She had trouble seeing past the pain. One day, she realized that while these darker moments were still difficult and painful, she could also begin to see possibilities in her life that she had previously been closed off from. She shared that those painful moments in her life provided new opportunities for her once she allowed herself to see past the darkness. I was so moved by her reflection because it perfectly illustrated the importance of looking for light and finding hope in Jewish tradition, even when things seem dark. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, another famous Hasidic master, teaches us that it is forbidden to despair, which on its surface might seem like Rabbi Nachman is suggesting that we ignore negative emotions, or that we do not even allow ourselves to be in the depths at all, that we just pretend it's not happening. But Rabbi Rachel Barenblatt, a contemporary Reform rabbi known for her beautiful poetry, offers another interpretation of Rabbi Nachman's words. She says that what Rabbi Nachman means by despair is that, quote, despair is giving up on the possibility of change, the possibility of hope, the possibility of anything ever being better than this, end quote. That is what we are not allowed to do. We cannot give up on hope, and we cannot give up on light. When we look for the light of possibilities, we help ourselves grow and change from our mistakes and help ourselves move from out of the depths towards hope. We can look for these sparks of light in whatever difficult moments of personal darkness or loss or change we experience. From a disappointing interaction to the loss of a job, the end of a relationship, or the need to accept that our current reality does not match what we envisioned for ourselves. After graduating college with a degree in biology, I imagined that I would work in medicine. I tentatively decided to pursue becoming a nurse practitioner and took a job working at a medical technology startup where I would get the needed clinical experience to apply to graduate school. But as I worked in a clinical setting, I came to realize that work wasn't for me. This lifelong dream of mine to work in medicine wasn't something that I wanted to pursue any further, and I really had no idea what I wanted to do with my life instead. That realization caused a great deal of loss and sadness. It is painful to realize that a goal you've worked towards for years isn't something you want anymore. When you're honest with yourself and listen to your authentic desires, it might mean that you have to change course. And I did. I found myself teaching preschool at the JCC in San Francisco. And I realized how much joy I found in helping others feel connected to their Judaism. This new work was meaningful, and I loved it. After soul-searching and careful thought, and especially after watching my synagogue's clergy care for my family during my dad's sudden death, I decided to become a rabbi. From the moment I made that internal decision, everything fell into place. Out of this painful realization that I needed a career change and the feelings of loss it created came the possibility of something different. The possibility to become a rabbi. We all have these pivots and experience times when we feel like we are in the depths. Out of our pain, beautiful things can grow, and eventually we can see the light again. Sometimes we just need to give ourselves permission to see the light and be open to how we can move forward after a painful experience. Also, we must remember those two pieces of papers that we hold metaphorically in our pockets. Of course, there is suffering in the world, and sometimes we are in the depths, and we are reminded of our humanness. Sometimes our grief can overwhelm us. And yet, the world was also made for us, for our uniqueness, and we have the capacity to find purpose and meaning even in our darker moments. Our collective task, then, in these next 10 days and beyond, is to try to notice the light in our lives, even as we acknowledge our grief, our pain, and the moments for which we need and want to do teshuvah. We must acknowledge both our pain and the light in the world around us so that we do not get so stuck in the depths that we forget that there is light. There is always light around us in our Jewish spaces, in the universe, and even in our darker moments. We are imperfect, and showing compassion to ourselves and others creates the space to see new opportunities, to see light, and to allow our hearts to grow. It can be difficult to find balance, to find hope in dark times. And yet, our tradition compels us to take on this challenge of holding multiple truths at once. Out of the depths of darkness, there is hope. Shana Tova.